Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the Shadow Fire Promotions podcast. My name is Greg Dennis. I am the president of Shadow Fire Promotions, your Chicago source for wrestling. You know, let me tell you, it has been way too long since I have done a podcast. Just way too long. Months. Like 3-4 months. Just insane. So I'm going to make a promise to everyone who's been asking. I will never allow this much time to go between podcasts. It's just crazy. Things have been crazy here, but that's no excuse. There's always time to podcast. So a couple of changes have been made in the podcast format here. We're starting with this one here. We're going to rename this one Front Row Ringside. So that's going to be our sort of official subtitle. It's going to be the Shadow Fire Promotions podcast, Front Row Ringside. Because the reason why is because people have been emailing us at podcast@sfpinchicago.com, and they've said, hey, are you always going to call it the Shadow Fire Promotions podcast, or are you actually going to have like a name like Talk is Jericho, or, you know, the Steve Austin Show, or something like that, you know, the Ross Report? And, you know, and really at the time the answer was, well, we hadn't really planned on anything because it's all about the branding. We want to be able to have something associated with the brand name of Shadow Fire Promotions, but that's not exactly the catchiest thing in the world. So you know, we wanted to rename it to something while still keeping our branding. So people that have been around for a while kind of understand that where we got the name Front Row Ringside, it's a couple of things. First off, obviously, it's a very wrestling thing. It's a very mixed martial arts thing. It fits in perfectly. If you are fans of the Pro Wrestling Illustrated family of magazines, and the way I say family of magazines, because there was a time back in the 80s, of the early 90s, where there was a lot of magazines under the Pro Wrestling Illustrated banner. There was Pro Wrestling Illustrated, The Wrestler, Inside Wrestling, Wrestling Superstars, Wrestling Spotlight. There was, 5-6 different magazines with the Pro Wrestling Illustrated branding. And in one of those magazines, I think it might have been The Wrestler, they had that first column was always Front Row Ringside. And I thought to myself, just what a very cool name for a wrestling type of thing, whether it be a column or a show or a magazine article or a magazine, you know, anything. And the name had always stuck with me, and I'd always thought to myself, if I had a way to use that name, I totally would. And it just so happens that this podcast opened up a perfect opportunity to do such. So we're still going to brand ourselves with Shadow Fire Promotions, so this is going to be sort of a sub-brand, if you will. One of the other things that kind of inspired it, besides that column, was the Muppets. Everyone kind of knows the Muppets, I hope. I remember reading something in the newspaper a while back that there was intending on being some sort of reboot of the Muppet Show, is that this was going to be a adult version of the Muppet Show. So I'm not sure, you know, if there's really an audience for a show with, you know, Kermit yelling "suck it" and doing crotch chops, but whatever. But in any case, what I was thinking about is, I was thinking about Statler and Waldorf, and if you don't know who those two guys are, those are the two old guys in the balcony that always used to heckle everyone. And I remember thinking, I remember reading something at a different time about the two guys, and no matter how much they heckle and tell everyone the show is awful and terrible, you know that next week they're going to be right back up there in the best seats in the house. And I kind of thought that's cool. And so that kind of inspired the name Front Row Ringside. So as of this podcast, forevermore, we're going to have this as sort of our subtitle. Now, what are we going to see on the Shadowfire Promotions podcast? If you're a first-time listener, thank you very much for listening. There's tons of podcasts out there. The aforementioned Talk is Jericho, Ross Report, Steve Austin Show, all sorts of great things out there. So believe me, I am sincerely flattered that you chose to listen to me yak for the next hour or so. So for those of you who are first-time listeners, let's go and give a little bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about here. There's going to be a little bit of wrestling, a little bit of pop culture, current events, a little bit of military stuff, a little bit of music and movies, merchandise, lots of cool merchandise. Gosh, we have so much cool merchandise here. You know, as I sit here in our studio and in my office here, so much cool stuff, unbelievable, and our warehouse has got even more. But there's just so much cool stuff, and we're going to talk about a lot of this stuff as we go on. First off, though, let's get all the depressing stuff out of the way. Actually, you know what, I take that back. Let me go and explain a little more to people that are either new or new to wrestling or anything else. There's going to be a lot of acronyms, a lot of abbreviations. I'm going to try and explain them as best as I can, either before or after or during. But if you're unfamiliar with the wrestling landscape previous to, say, the mid-1980s, you're going to hear a lot of references to territories. Oh, this person's territory, that person's territory. And what that means is that prior to the mid-1980s, when the World Wrestling Federation kind of absorbed everything and became their own thing, wrestling was split up into about a dozen or 24 different territories, each territory encompassing certain states or certain cities within a state, depending on how big the state was. And they kind of encompass certain states and cities within those states. And each territory generally was a member of the overreaching National Wrestling Alliance, or NWA. So when you hear NWA, that is the National Wrestling Alliance. It's not niggas with attitude. It is not anything else. And the National Wrestling Alliance was considered the governing body of pro wrestling. So they made sure that all the territories kind of worked together as much as they could. And the territories all were bound by the agreement that they would never go and infringe upon another member's territory. So if you had the Chicago territory, you would never cross over to Minneapolis. That was just unheard of. Never would you go and do that. That belonged to someone else. And it was kind of a gentleman's agreement, but the NWA kept everyone in line because even though each territory had their own regional champion, the biggest money was to be made by the traveling NWA champion, whomever that was at the time. That was the major biggest bucks. If he came into the territory and he wrestled your top guy, it was a huge box office. So you never wanted to cross anyone for fear of losing out on that big money when the NWA champion came into your territory. And if you were in what was considered an outlaw promotion, you decided for whatever reason, screw all this territory stuff, forget all this is all nonsense, it's terrible, I'm going to go in there, then all the other promotions were expected to rally up to your defense and send all their best talent your way to make sure that whatever card you had would completely blow that other guy out of the water. And again, that was kind of one of the perks of the National Wrestling Alliance and being an NWA member. The territories broke up. The seeds of the territorial breakup, it's a very long and complicated story, but to break it down in the simplest terms, the seeds of the territory demise, the territorial system demise, were laid because whomever was the NWA president at that time had to be an NWA member. And the membership voted on who was going to be the person that was going to be the NWA champion. So there was a lot of favoritism and cronyism and kind of old boy kind of stuff. And a lot of people grew frustrated with that and felt they could strike out on their own. Now, that sort of fractured the NWA Championship when you had all these people, phantom title changes, which is a title change that technically happened, but only for the live crowd. It was never acknowledged anywhere else. Or you had someone who said, well, I'm going to create my own version of the NWA Championship, and that kind of splintered the lineage of it a little bit. But one of the biggest things that had happened is Vern Gagne, who I'm going to discuss in actual great detail in a few moments, when he broke away to form his AWA, and this was in the 1960s, and he was frustrated that he was one of the top contenders. He was always in the top 10, but he could not get a title shot. So he kind of broke away, and he formed his American Wrestling Association. And you'll see the same AWA logo or a variation of it on John Cena when he wears his Hustle, Loyalty, and Respect shirt with the HLR, and it's got the stars and kind of a shield design, the red, white, and the blue. That's the actual AWA logo. It's been modified a little bit for Cena, but that is the AWA logo. And there are a couple others who splintered off. The Mid-South territory, which is Louisiana and Texas and a couple other cities and states, had formed the UWF, and that was Bill Watts, who was a former, well, not yet, but he would be a future president of World Championship Wrestling in the early part of the 90s. And he kind of gathered up a few territories. And Jim Crockett, who was the Mid-Atlantic territory, which encompassed the Carolinas, Virginia, some parts of, I believe, Tennessee, some parts of Kentucky. I'm not sure if he had any part of Tennessee. I'm pretty sure he had Kentucky. There's a big, if you look out online, there's a big map that shows kind of where all the territorial boundaries were back in the day. But the biggest thing that hurt them was Vince McMahon, Mr. McMahon on television. He had bought the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, was renamed the World Wrestling Federation by that point, from his father. And his father made him promise, don't ever go and cross territorial lines. These are my friends. Don't do this. Even though we're separate, we're technically not a part of the NWA. I still sit on the board. Just don't do it. And he made Vince promise never to do it. And when Vince McMahon's father had passed, Vince promptly broke the promise that he had made to his dad, and decided that he thought that this system was a load of bunk. He didn't like it. He wanted to be the only wrestling federation around. He hated pro wrestling. He hated the old boy system. He thought it was a bunch of bunk. So what he did is he found the best talent from all over the U.S. and paid them a whole boatload of cash to walk out on whatever promotion they were working for. No notice, no nothing. Just walk out and come work for him. Paid these guys boatloads of cash to do it. And then he would go and have them on his shows, which were, big, flashy, lots of showbiz flair, lots of lights and stuff, music, something a little different than the smaller television shows that the territories are using that were often filmed in the TV studios. He liked all that glitz and the glamour and everything from it. So then he'd tape it and then sell it to different television stations where the production quality was so much better than what was filming, and oftentimes Vince McMahon would pay television stations himself to air his product in favor of the local competitor. So he'd say, whatever you're paying them, I'll pay you. I'll pay you to air my product. So he would convince them to air his product, and so he would often bump the local territory from it, and soon it came to a head when all the territories, instead of going and doing what they were supposed to, which was they're supposed to kind of stand by each other and this and that, and help everyone else, but they didn't. Instead, they were kind of every man for himself, and that really kind of hurt them because, as Vince McMahon had once said on a DVD release, these guys couldn't even order a cup of coffee together, much less do anything else. And these guys were trying to go and form a wrestling company to challenge Vince McMahon's World Wrestling Federation. So it didn't really work very well. And so that was kind of the demise of the territories right there. But anyhow, so that's when we talk about territories, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about all these old, smaller regional areas. And a lot of people like to say, oh, it's just, these small little dinky promotions and smoke-filled back rooms. They kind of want to liken it to what independent wrestling is today. Oh, little dinky things, no one made any money. Vince McMahon is so great. He didn't do anything. These guys kind of self-destructed. Well, that's not necessarily true, because while the territories probably would have self-destructed all by their lonesome eventually, the bottom line is that these territories, the 1 or 2 dozen territories, were all full-time territories where people could make a living there. So no matter how small and dinky they were in comparison to what WWE is presently, they were nowhere near what you think of if you're thinking of modern indie wrestling, where these guys are just doing it on weekends and have to have a day job and all this. It's not true. That's kind of the fallacy that Vince McMahon wants you to believe. Vince doesn't like to have anyone have done anything other than him. No one else can be a success except for him. It sort of goes against his kind of agenda, if you will, to have anyone else have had any sort of success in pro wrestling. And speaking of pro wrestling, on a minor side note, you will almost never hear the word sports entertainment on anything of ours. You won't hear it on message board, our podcast, our Facebook. You will not hear it anywhere. We despise the term sports entertainment. Anytime that phrase is used, it's either used specifically to describe something that Vince McMahon has used himself, or it's used very tongue-in-cheek. There is no such thing as sports entertainment. Okay, it's pro wrestling. There is the only place where sports entertainment exists is in the mind of Vince McMahon. Every newspaper article talks about pro wrestling. Every magazine, every newspaper, every television show that discusses WWE talks about pro wrestling. The only time sports entertainment is used is Vince McMahon. For one, it's because he doesn't really like what he believes pro wrestling is, and for two, it gives him an opportunity to kind of control the way people describe his WWE. But you're never going to hear sports entertainment because there is no such thing. The only people that use it are those within WWE, bottom line. So, next thing. We're going to get all the depressing stuff out of the way. It has not been a very good spring at all for pro wrestling. Back in, I believe it was May last month, Vern Gagne had passed. Vern Gagne, we mentioned earlier, the owner of the American Wrestling Association. He used to have he had his territory, even though the AWA tried to go national, he mainly controlled the Minneapolis area, and he did some stuff in Wisconsin, some stuff here in Chicago, but he mainly stuck to kind of the northern area, Chicago, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, which is a little further south, I realize, but he mainly kind of ran shows in that area because since he was from Minneapolis himself, Minneapolis was where he was a big, big star, although he actually did some shows as far west as Oklahoma, because that was one of the territories that he was big in. And Vern Gagne had been suffering from Alzheimer's for several years, and so he had finally passed, I believe it was complications from pneumonia, if I'm not mistaken, but I have not looked at it before I started broadcasting this, so you'll forgive me if a couple of things aren't necessarily 100%. Then last month, or actually this month, about 10, maybe 15 days ago, Tommy Rogers of the Fantastics died very suddenly. Tommy Rogers, along with his tag team partner Bobby Fulton, were the Fantastics. And they were a team in the mold of the Fabulous Ones. If you remember the Fabulous Ones, Stan Lane, Steve Cairn, a bunch of pretty boys, handsome guys, very athletic, muscular, good-looking guys, high flyers. They were kind of a team in the mold of that. And they had worked the Jim Crockett territory. They were probably famous for their stuff in the Jim Crockett territory, their feuds with the Midnight Express. If you remember the Rock and Roll Express, that was kind of another team of that same sort of vein. They weren't the biggest guys in the world, but they won over the female audience because there were some good-looking guys, and they won over the male audience because they just put on such great matches, you know, high flyers, just very athletic style. Tommy Rogers had been on the Steve Austin show about a month or so before he died, and he had detailed the toll that pro wrestling had taken on his body. You know, he talked about how he'd have to get up and soak a little bit each day just to be able to move. It took him about an hour to get out of bed. And he said, you know, this is what you know, it did. He obviously said, you know, I wouldn't trade it all for anything. This is what I've done. Excuse me, this is what I've done. So the death of Tommy Rogers, who, you know, was very unexpected. It seemed like he was in very good spirits. You know, he obviously, the years of wrestling took a toll on him physically, but he was very appreciative of everything. He was working in a warehouse now for a major retail chain. Obviously, he declined the state, and you know, Steve Austin didn't push it because obviously that's a personal thing with him. But so it was very unexpected and a great loss. And then just days ago, unfortunately, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, had passed. Dusty was 69, and Dusty was probably one of the most iconic figures in the pro wrestling industry. He had been wrestling from the 70s onwards. He had even done some wrestling appearances in the mid-90s. He had done commentary. He had been a manager, mostly of his own son, Dustin, who WWE fans recognize as Goldust. He was extremely creative behind the scenes. He created the Bunkhouse Stampede, was one of his many wrestling concepts that he had done. In his more infamous moment, he created what's known as the Dusty Finish, and unfortunately, that's one of those things that was creative at the time, but it was used over and over, very Hollywood-esque. It was just run to the ground as a concept and hurt attendance in the Crockett territory where Dusty had worked. And there was also some professional rivalries that Dusty had with Ric Flair. But in the end, you know, Dusty was a 3-time NWA World Champion. He'll always have those championships. Wasn't the best worker in the world, but, you know, he admits that he wasn't really in great shape for a lot of his career. Oftentimes he relied on his opponents to make movement for him. He'd just kind of use his bionic elbow and he'll run up and get hit. The same sort of thing that Hulk Hogan would be accused of, and probably rightfully so. With Dusty, my understanding is from, I think it was Jerry Briscoe had said that Dusty had been attempting to lose some weight recently. He wanted to get his high blood pressure under control. And unfortunately, it had been reported through TMZ that Dusty had taken a fall recently and had just kind of went downhill from there over the next few days until he passed. And my good friend R.H. Rusev had talked about remembering Dusty Rhodes and kind of celebrating Dusty Rhodes' life. And what made Dusty, if people don't understand Dusty, what made Dusty so special? Because if you look at it, it's like, oh, this big fat guy, you know, with kind of a lisp. What makes Dusty so special? And if you remember seeing him in the World Wrestling Federation, the WWF, if you remember seeing him then with his polka dots and sapphire and those terrible Common Man vignettes, you know, people are like, I don't get what makes Dusty so special. But Dusty had an ability to connect with the people. He really had the ability to connect with an audience and draw money. And make no mistake, Dusty drew a lot of money in his time. And Dusty was very good at that. And Dusty, like Ric Flair, whom he had a lot of professional rivalries with, and several other from that era, were very good at going off the cuff and just saying what was on their mind when they cut a promo. And that's something that's missing in the modern day era of pro wrestling, where everything is so tightly scripted. It doesn't allow many people to find their voice when every single word is written out on the page. You have to sit there and memorize it. You know, you don't get these classic promos anymore from guys like Flair. You know, Rick has never needed cue cards or anything else to do a promo, and Dusty has never needed it. Dusty's always just worked off the cuff, doing and saying whatever comes to mind, but they are able to sell tickets. And what we're going to do, we're going to go and play for you real quick. Hopefully we don't get in trouble for doing this. This is one of the very few times we do this kind of a thing, because quite frankly, we're not sure. It's kind of a gray area of legality. But we're going to play a little bit of Dusty Rhodes. It's probably one of his most famous promos. It was called his Hard Times promo, and he talks about hard times. This is specifically against Ric Flair. It's the Jim Crockett territory. It's Mid-Atlantic Wrestling. It comes October 29th, 1985. We're going to play for you right now. Dusty Rhodes. This is Bob Caudle as the announcer.
To thank the many fans throughout this country that wrote cards and letters just to wrote the American dream while I was down. Secondly, I want to thank Jim Crockett Promotions for waiting and taking the time, because I know how important it was. Starcade 85 it is to the wrestling fans, it is to Jim Crockett Promotion. And Dusty wrote the American dream. With that weight, got what I wanted. Ric Flair, the world's heavyweight champion. I don't have to say a lot more about the way I feel about Ric Flair. No respect, no honor. There is no honor among thieves in the first place. He put hard times on Dusty Rhodes and his family. You don't know what hard times are, Daddy. Hard times are when the textile workers around this country are out of work. They got 4 or 5 kids and can't pay their wages, can't buy their food. Hard times are when the auto workers are out of work and they tell them go home. And hard times are when a man has worked at a job 30 years. 30 years. They give him a watch, kick him in the butt, and say, hey, a computer took your place, Daddy. That's hard time. That's hard time. And Ric Flair, you put hard times on this country by taking Dusty Rhodes out. That's hard time. And we all had hard times together. I admit I don't look like the athlete of the day supposed to look. My belly's just a little big. My hand is just a little big. But brother, I am bad and they know I'm bad. And there were two bad people. One was John Wayne and he's dead, brother. And the other one's right here. Nature Boy Ric Flair. The World's Heavyweight title belongs to these people. I'm going to reach out right now. I want you at home to know my hand is touching your hand for this gathering of the biggest body of people in this country, in this universe, all over the world now, reaching out because the love that was given me, and this time I will repay you now because I will be the next world's heavyweight champion on this Hard Time Blues. Dusty Rhodes Tour 85 and Ric Flair, Nature Boy. Let me leave you with this. One way to hurt Ric Flair is to take what he cherishes more than anything in the world. That's the world's heavyweight title. I'm going to take it. I've been there twice. This time when I take it, Daddy, I'm going to take it for you. Let's gather for it. Don't let me down now, because I came back for you, for that man up there that died 10, 12 years ago and never got the opportunity to see a real world champion. I'm proud of you. Thank God I have you. I love you. Love you!
So I hope everyone enjoyed the Hard Times promo. Dusty had been all over the place. While that promo was playing, I took the liberty of going and pulling up some of the information on Dusty. He worked a lot in Jim Crockett Promotion, which was eventually what World Championship Wrestling was. And some of the stuff he's credited with is the War Games, Battle Bowl, and the Lethal Lottery. Now, let's explain a few of these things because most people probably don't know what they are. War Games was a concept with a double ring, double steel cage where one team or both teams certainly would flip. There was a coin toss backstage and would determine after the first two guys went in who was going to be the third guy. So who would have that 2-on-1 advantage? You'd flip a coin. So either Team A or Team B had that one-man advantage. And then you'd have the match beyond, which is when all four guys, I think it was 4 guys or 5 guys, went into the ring and everyone went on each other. So that was the match beyond. Battle Bowl and the Lethal Lottery. Battle Bowl was eventually kind of like a World War III sort of a thing. If you remember that concept from late year WCW, where teams are randomly in a battle royal concept if they won their tag team match. Their tag team match was determined by the Lethal Lottery, where a random drawing determines who you'll be tag teaming with. So you could be with someone who has never been your tag team partner, someone who's never been in tag teams, or someone who you have a violent feud with. So just a totally random drawing. So those were very, those are some of the gimmick finishes that Dusty had created during his time, as well as the so-called Dusty finish, which is considered, unfortunately, it might be considered one of Dusty's legacies because he loved to go to it, and unfortunately, it was something that it kind of hurt attendance because he went to it once too often, or many times too often, depending on who you ask. But basically, the Dusty finish is that the rule breaker will win a championship or a match or something, and they'll win it. Other way around. The fan favorite's going to win the match, and everyone cheers, and it's a great thing, and all of a sudden the referee takes that title or that win or that victory and gives it right back to the rule breaker due to something that happened when the referee wasn't looking or was knocked out or something. And so that was kind of Dusty's go-to thing, and it unfortunately killed off business in the Crockett territory after a while because Dusty went to that well once too often. In pop culture, we've recently had passings of Sir Christopher Lee, the actor, the English actor who's probably most famous for his role in Dracula and the Hammer films. We've lost B.B. King, the great B.B. King, the great musician, the blues musician. The B.B. is Blues Boy King. That was one of his original nicknames for you to shorten it to B.B. King. And when I was having a discussion with B.B. King about with someone else during shortly after he died, and they said, "Well, I don't understand Lucille." And I had said, "Well, every guitar he's ever held has been named Lucille." And they go, "That's cute, he names guitar Lucille." And I said, "No, because there was a time early on in his career when they had to go and heat places with kerosene buckets. They'd have a wick and a big bucket of kerosene, and they would burn the kerosene in an attempt to heat up clubs before you had, this is back in the 40s or whatever." So when he was very young, and one of these clubs he was playing, two guys got into a fight, and one of these barrels was knocked over, and the whole club was set ablaze, and King had successfully managed to get out, but he remembered he had left his guitar there, so he quickly rushed back in to get his guitar, and he just barely made it back out a second time. And later on, he had read that the two guys who were fighting had unfortunately passed in the fire, and that the reason they were fighting was over a woman, and her name was Lucille. And so ever since that time, every single guitar that B.B. King has owned, he had called Lucille as a double reminder. First off, is to never do something as dumb as running back in a burning building just for a guitar, just for a musical instrument. You can always get another guitar. And two, is to never get into a fight over a woman. So ever since then, he had named his guitar Lucille. Kind of our last thing in the depressing stuff, Davy Boy Smith, the British Bulldog. There's been an online petition I've seen to get to get Davy Boy in the WWE Hall of Fame. This petition has been got a lot of mileage. Medusa, midget wrestler Short Sleeve Samson. There's a lot of people. I don't have all the names in front of me, but there's a lot of big names that have been lobbying for this to happen. There's no doubt that this petition is clearly going to get way over 1,000 signatures. I've seen some people going and pushing it on LinkedIn and some other places. So there's no doubt this petition is going to get 1,000 signatures. The big question is going to be, is there a chance, does Davey Boy stand a chance of getting in the WWE Hall of Fame? And it has less to do with the championships and his accomplishments in WWE. It's got more to do with the fact that WWE is always very, very reluctant to go and put people in the Hall of Fame that are deceased. It's very uncomfortable for them, and it calls attention, especially when it's someone like Davey Boy who died relatively young. It calls attention to some of their not so nice practices. It calls attention to guys that have had drug issues and other medical issues. So yeah, it's not a good thing for them. So that's the big question. I mean, is Davey Boy worthy of being in the Hall of Fame? He was a huge draw in England. He was a huge draw in Canada. He's won a lot of championships. He's got a lot of people, pushing for it, but I'm not sure if it's going to happen as far as WWE goes because of their reluctance to push anyone who has deceased. Anyway, onwards. So, some more pop culture stuff. Unfortunately, Ben E. King, who did Stand By Me, he was one of the, I can't think of the group he is in, another male R&B group I can't think of her out the top of my head. And Grace Lee Whitney, who was Yeoman Janet Rand, she had passed in the month of May at age 85 of natural causes. Benny King was a member of the Drifters. They did Up on the Roof. That was I believe, before Benny King's time, but he had recently passed as well. So, anyhow, here's some fun stuff. Now we're going to try and move on to some more fun stuff here. I got this in an email from someone. Apparently someone posted this on a message board. It says, I said before that wrestling is nowhere near as popular as it used to be, and that is a major problem. Have you seen the most recent ratings? Not good. Honestly, it worries me. I don't want them to go out of business, but let's face the facts. They have no competition. They are losing money. They are losing viewers. Even the most talented wrestlers are not draws. They're out of touch with pop culture and what fans like these days. I can see the company unfortunately going out of business within 5 to 8 years. What do you think? Now, this was posted on Facebook, on the Shadowfire Promotions Facebook, which is at facebook.com/SFP, like Shadowfire Promotions, INC Chicago. This is possibly one of the more ridiculous things I have heard of in a long time. I'm going to take this point by point. Wrestling is not as popular as it used to be. The Attitude Era is probably the most popular it has been since the early 1980s. So, correct. Wrestling is not as popular as it used to be. The recent ratings? Probably not so great. You know, WWE does have ups and downs in their ratings. But the notion of them going out of business is just such complete and total nonsense. It's unbelievable that someone could actually go with a straight face and say that WWE will be out of business within 5 to 8 years. They have no competition, correct. They're losing money? I don't think so. Not according to their recent statements with the SEC, they're not losing money. Not that I'm aware of. If they're lying to the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, that's a whole different thing, but they're far from losing money. They've got tons of money. They got more money than you and I combined. They've got gobs of cash. They are not going anywhere monetarily. They're losing viewers. I'm not so sure about that either. Their network is taking off slower than they expected, but it's taking off. You know, and it's going to be the only way to see WWE very soon. You know, they put all their pay-per-views in the network, and I do not know if they're going to continue to put out DVDs, although if I was them, I certainly would, because it's another avenue of making money. More than the $9.99 a month is going to make them, but I'm certainly not privy to that. But then they're out of touch with pop culture. Well, WWE's been out of touch with pop culture for years and years and years, so that's nothing new. But you know, their most talented wrestlers are not draws. Well, really, that depends on what you consider a draw and who you consider the most talented wrestler to be, and on what basis you're you know, using that phrase as. You know, are we talking about a pure wrestler, someone who is, you know, very, very scientifically adept? Are we talking about the guy who gets the biggest cheers from the crowd? You know, I'm not sure quite what that individual is trying to say there, but the notion of WWE being out of business within 5 to 8 years is just so ridiculous. I mean, the only time when WWE wanted to start their nightclub, that they had done stuff in the mid-90s, mid to late 90s, and I think they called it The World, WWE eventually decided that that wasn't their thing and sold the nightclub, and I believe they sold it as a loss. But they could have weathered losses like that for years before they actually started really, truly losing money. They may lose money in individual transactions, like the nightclub, like the XFL, but it'd be years, if not decades, before they really truly lose money. They are not going anywhere. Despite what anyone else thinks, they are not going anywhere. WWE is here to stay. They have more than enough money to keep them afloat for many, many, many years. 5 to 8 years, they could lose money straight for 5 to 8 years and still be in business. They are not losing money by any stretch of the imagination. So, anyone who thinks that WWE is going out of business is sorely, sorely, sorely mistaken. That's just not happening. Okay, so, more WWE. As long as we're on the topic, we're going to talk a little bit about the authority in WWE. You know, WWE has been running virtually the same gimmick since 1998 with someone, the owner of the company, trying to screw over everyone else. And at least for me, it's such an annoying, tired, over-with gimmick. Because it's kind of like, first off, you can't fight the man, but Steve Austin did fight the man. You know, and he won. But, you know, it's just, everyone's so powerless, you know, and that's the way they portray it on television. Everyone is so powerless against the authority. So it really takes the wind out of the sails of everyone. You know, it takes the wind out of the sails of the heels because we're transferring any heat from these rule breakers from anything they've done. We're transferring it right over to Triple H and Stephanie. And the fan favorites certainly can't get anywhere because they bow down to the authority. Oh, we're not going to fight the authority. We're not going to do anything. So it's really just such a worn out, tired, done with concept. And at least for me, I can only hope they go and get over it soon because really it doesn't do anything for them. It's just so tired and so old. And it's just done with. It's so done with. You know, no one gets over except for the authority. The fan favorites don't get over. The rule breakers don't get over. No one gets over except the authority, because the authority takes all that heat and it projects onto themselves. And when it's Stephanie and Triple H, they're not even active wrestlers, so it really doesn't do anything for WWE to have them as the focal point. And for those who are too young to remember, there was a time in pro wrestling when you just had wrestler versus wrestler. You did not have some central owner saying, well, screw you, I'm going to screw you over, I want to try and do something to make sure that you don't get what you want. There was a time when that did not happen. And as surprising as it may be, there was a time when it didn't happen. You know, before Stone Cold, in 1998, 1997, you know, really, truly before the Montreal screw job, which, for those who are not familiar, basically what happened is Bret Hart was at an impasse with Vince McMahon regarding his exit from the then World Wrestling Federation. Bret had reasonable creative control on his way out, and he felt that to lose in Canada on his way out, especially to Shawn Michaels, who he was in a real-life personal rivalry with, would be bad for his image. And he said, look, I'll lose to anyone else, but I'm not really interested in losing to Shawn. And I'm not sure that's a good idea to lose in Canada, because you portrayed me, you know, in this last year as this guy who hates everything American and loves Canada and Europe, and Vince McMahon had convinced him, you know, you're right, we'll do this major screw job, you know, we'll have everyone run in, and you'll be fine. And this was going to go down at Survivor Series 97. And he said, look, let me win in Canada. I'll go on Raw, I'll surrender the belt, or I'll lose to someone. Let me put over Kenny Shamrock. Let me put over someone else. And McMahon led Brett to believe that, sure, I'd love to do that. And that last minute, he went, and when Brett was put in his own finishing hold by Shawn Michaels, the sharpshooter, Vince instructed the referee to quickly ring the bell and end the match and awarded the title to Shawn, even though Brett did not submit. And that led to some seriously frosty relations between Brett and McMahon for quite some time after. But pretty much ever since then, when the Mr. McMahon character was created, so we've had this go for 15 years now almost. This evil, heelish, rule-breaking authority that you cannot get ahead of because the owners are out to screw you. And from a storyline sense, it doesn't often make a lot of sense either. So hopefully that ends soon, because really, it's done, it's over with, it's tired. It's lazy booking is what it really is. It's lazy booking. So, recent events. Today is Sunday, which means that recently you went and saw the latest, entry in the Chicago Blackhawks versus Tampa Bay Lightning in hockey. And you've seen them go and win. The Blackhawks have won the last 2 games against the Lightning. So that puts the Blackhawks at 3-2 versus Tampa Bay's 2-3. Now, the reason we're mentioning this has less to do with the fact that we're in Chicago, and this is our hometown team, but it has more to do with something. I remember seeing something on television, it might have been Good Morning America or something, where Hogan had said, well, Tampa's my team, and, I'm rooting for Tampa, and, Tampa never loses when I'm in the stands. I don't think he said that much. I don't remember. I only briefly saw it. But he said something, well, Tampa's good luck charm. Anytime my daughter Brooke goes and sings the national anthem, they don't lose. So I'm guessing, based on that Brooke was not singing the national anthem at the last 2 events. Or, the first one, the first against the Lightning, because they lost. But I just find it funny that Hogan is always pushing something about himself and pushing that his daughter singing is the key to their success. And, I remember seeing this and someone's just laughing. And someone's looking at me laughing and wondering what the hell is wrong with me. And I said, you have to be a wrestling person to understand. But it was just really, really funny, for me at least. Really, really funny. So we're going to talk a little bit about current events. Current events here. Not current events as you might think. We're not going to talk about whatever's in the news or anything like that. But we're going to talk about current events going on right now in terms of stuff that is going on right now that relates to stuff that Shadowfire Promotions is involved with. So this coming Thursday, which is the 18th, June 18, we have Monsters of the 5K, 10K. This is a 5K run walk and a 10K run. It is hosted by our good friends over at Universal Soul. You can check them out at Universal Soul, S-O-L-E, universalsoul.com. These guys, good friends of ours. Their owner, Joel, great guy. Ryan Dolan, Joel Feinberg, great guys, good friends of ours. Their head of security is Rhonda Anderson. All great people to work with. I've worked with them just countless times. Great people to do business with, great people to run with. But this race is going down. It's going to start at Soldier Field in Chicago. This race is this Thursday. So if you want to do something with it, this is a sort of a spin-off of the Tillman Run. If you remember last year when we were hyping the Tillman Run, we've sort of gone and done a couple of things and gotten in a few more charities. So the Monsters of the 5K, 10K is going to benefit more than just Charles Tillman's Cornerstone Foundation. It's actually going to be a part of the Charles Tillman Cornerstone Foundation, the Jarrett Payton Foundation, which of course is by Walter Payton's son Jarrett, and Jerry Azuma's ASAP Foundation. So this is just a really fantastic race. You can go to active.com and register there for the race. You can volunteer, be a volunteer monster. They've got a kids run for little tykes. They've got, you can do, be a team captain, have your team in there. You can be a virtual runner. You can do all sorts of things. You also can go to universalsole.com. That's universal, SOLE.com, like the sole of your shoe, because it's a running goods store. But if you want to get with it, message me. You can message me and any other questions related to this podcast at podcast@sfpinchicago.com. If you want to reach me directly, leave a message at 847-489-2087. If you want to go and email me direct, that is gdennis at sfpinchicago.com. But it's a really good cause, really good race run by some great people. If you want to walk it, just do anything, you know what? Get out there. It's a good race. It's for a good cause. It's great weather. Get out there. It's you might have a chance to see me. Talk wrestling with me. I'll be there. I'll be helping out. So be a part of this thing. Really, be a part of this. Is great. Okay. Some more charity stuff. We've got my buddy Daniel Puder. He's undefeated mixed martial arts pro wrestler. Daniel Puder, undefeated in mixed martial arts, undefeated in pro wrestling. He is the first $1 million Tough Enough champion. Daniel Puder. And if you don't know what he's doing right now, I know I mentioned it a couple of times. He is a founder of a new charity. It's called My Life, My Power. And it is an anti-bullying charity. And Dan is about to make his in-ring comeback. So yeah, he is coming back to the ring. He's putting up his undefeated record. He's going out there, and he's going to be in the Pasadena, Texas area. So if you want to hook up with my buddy Dan Puder, let him know that, hey, you got here through Shadowfire Promotion, you got here through Greg Dennis. Just let him know. If you're in Pasadena, he's coming out there. If you want some details, you go to mylifemypowerent.com. This is coming up on the 21st, so that is what, Sunday, I think? So that is Sunday. So if you want to do Monsters of the 5K, 10K, that's this Thursday the 18th, then you can go. And if you're in Houston or you want to go out to Houston, hey, check out my buddy Daniel Puder in Pasadena. Not Houston, I apologize, Pasadena. And you can go to mylifemypowerent.com for information about that. And if you want to make a tax-deductible donation to Danny's charity, you can go to mylifemypower.org. So it's a really, really good charity to get involved in. Very, very cool. Something you can really get behind. People always wonder, what charities can I do? I'd like to get a charity. I don't know which one. What can I do that's really associated with something I like? Here's something to go and donate your money to, okay? Very, very cool. So, last thing before we talk about some stuff in the news, we're going to talk a little bit more. I'm all sorts of all over the place. I'm reading my notes wrong here. I'm going to talk the last thing wrestling before we talk about a little bit of the news and merchandise. We're going to talk about Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor is now on Destination America, which if you have been paying attention, that is the new home of Total Nonstop Action Wrestling as well. So there's a little bit of unrest there, as you know, the people in Total Nonstop Action are like, hey, what happens now that this other wrestling show is there? You know, are we being renewed? Are we being canceled? What's the deal? And a lot of these guys are being banned from wrestling elsewhere by the terms of their Total Nonstop Action contract. So we will see what happens there. But if you're watching, if you have Destination America, you know, we encourage you. Well, we'll never say don't watch wrestling. Watch as much as you can, whether it be tapes, DVDs, whatever. If you're on Ring of Honor, I know that one of my good buddies, Silas Young, is on Ring of Honor. The Last Real Man, I think, is the nickname he's going by now. You know, I've known Silas for many, many years. Silas is a great, terrific guy. And you should really see him in the ring because he's really a very talented kind of fella. And so definitely if you get a chance to see Silas, you know, as I say, I've known Silas for a lot of years. I've seen him wrestle, you know, go up to the ranks in Milwaukee and Green Bay, and he's just very, very talented, and he deserves everything he's got. So, you know, make an opportunity to go and check out Ring of Honor on Destination America, and hey, see Total Nonstop Action. And now, you know, this isn't just a plug for them, because the question is going to be, okay, what's going to happen with Total Nonstop Action? It could be like a block of wrestling where we have Total Nonstop Action and Ring of Honor. That would be very cool. But with the two different groups and everything, it's probably not going to happen. So I think that we're going to have to see, you know, what really does happen with these two groups, because if Total Nonstop Action loses their Destination America programming, that is going to be a very, very big blow against the promotion. I'm not sure what they would do if they lost that, because that's very big, very important to them and to the survival of that particular company. So hopefully no one loses their jobs. Hopefully everyone still manages to make their rent and their mortgage and everything else. And that's a sincere thing. You know, we never want to see anyone losing their job, losing their mortgage, and anything else. Hopefully we all find a way to get along and win. Hopefully it's a win-win for everyone with Total Nonstop Action and Destination America and everything else. But time will tell. Time will tell with all that. So hopefully we'll see. All right, so onwards. We've got lots and lots of cool merchandise that we're going to talk about. But first, we're going to talk the briefest bit about current events, because there's one thing that I'm seeing constantly in the news, and it's a personal thing with me. I'm a veteran. I'm a Marine. So I want to talk a little bit about the issues. You know, everyone's been hearing the news about the Veterans Administration and all the stuff that's going down with the VA. And really the bottom line with the VA is this. Yes, the Veterans Administration has a corrupt culture. Yes, the Veterans Administration has issues, you know, technology issues, spending issues, all this sort of stuff. There's a lot of issues with the Veterans Administration. But here's the thing. There's no incentive, one way or the other, for the Veterans Administration to shape up, as it were, because you can't do anything against it. You can't cut off their funding. It hurts the veterans. You can't sit there and say, well, we won't give you any more money after this, for the same reason. It hurts the veterans. Everything you do hurts the veterans. There's really little you can do against the VA that does not hurt the veteran. So you're in a very just a really bad position because, again, the VA has no reason to clean up its act, as it were. Yeah, there's waste and there's fraud, but unfortunately with government jobs, you face the problem of there's all these appeals. Okay, you have to warn someone you're going to fire them, and then you have to bring it up to the commander you're going to fire them, and then you have to get permission to fire the person. And then when you fire them, they can go and apply for an appeal to their firing, and then there's a board they have to apply to, and that takes 30 days for a decision. So, and then even that decision, you can still appeal that. So it's just virtually impossible to ever fire someone. So being a government job, there's a lot of people that just are cruising along and just don't care, and there's no reason for them to use the money they have to upgrade their systems so everything talks to one another. There's an article I read, well, we'd like to automate everything and have everything speak to one another, but it's not going to happen. It never will happen because there's really not a reason for it for the people in charge to want to have all these computer systems talk to each other, because as long as you have all these redundancies and paper records and everything going on, then they can have bonuses for people that are screwing around and all sorts of other things, and it's very complicated, and it's unfortunate because really, no matter what, it all hurts the veteran. There's an internet meme going around, the VA offering veterans a second chance to die for their country. But it's a shame. It's a real shame that it has to be that way. It's a shame that you have veterans who are dying. It's a shame that you have a Veterans Administration that says, well, I understand that you're suicidal. I understand you're going to kill yourself. Make an appointment and we'll try and squeeze you in 6 months from now, but for now, go home. And then you find the guy swinging from the chandelier that next morning. It's incredibly unfortunate. It's unfortunate. It's sad. It's sad. It really is. There's no reason for it to be like that, but like everything else, it's the culture. The culture has to change. The culture within the Veterans Administration, the government protection of these people has to change before anything can be done. So, I don't see it changing anytime soon, but I certainly wish it would, for the sake of all veterans. There's people that can't afford health insurance on their own and rely on the Veterans Administration, and the Veterans Administration is saying, well, we have a year-long waiting list, go home. So that really kind of stinks. So it's very unfortunate. I'm not the legislation required to change that. It would be really nice if someone in charge made legislation to change that, but I don't see it happening in the near future either, unfortunately. So, anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about some of the great merchandise. I'm going to focus a lot on wrestling stuff because I've got some of the coolest stuff. I was at the Cauliflower Alley Club reunion in April, and let me tell you, if you are even remotely involved in the pro wrestling business, you need to be a member of the Cauliflower Alley Club. I am a life member. I am proud to be a life member. The Cauliflower Alley Club is the ring of friendship. It is a fraternal, benevolent organization. It's a chance for wrestling personalities to catch up with one another. Even if it's only once a year, it's a chance to pay tribute to the wrestlers. It's a chance to go and meet a lot of wrestlers. And it's a chance to in a lot of cases, the benevolent fund is a chance to help out wrestlers. These guys who didn't make millions in their career and who are now suffering through the aches and pains of what the ring did to them in their years. You know, I was talking with Larry Hennig at it, and he said, I got a bad neck, I got a bad back, I've got bad knees. And, you know, for guys in his generation, they didn't make the millions of dollars that someone like Edge did or Steve Austin, and it's not ready for them to do podcasts and acting jobs and such. You know, the opportunities weren't there for guys the generation before someone like a Hulk Hogan or something. So these guys are hurting, and they have no ability to get life insurance or health insurance or fix the different problems. Nick Bockwinkel, I remember reading an article when I was there about Nick Bockwinkel, and someone had mentioned something to Nick about wrestling being fake, and he said, yeah, I'll give you a fake body slam on the fake canvas, and you can see how fake it feels. And he talked about tearing something, I forget if it was a calf or a triceps or a biceps or something, and he kept working on it through it because he just couldn't afford the time off for surgery, because unfortunately, in a lot of the cases for guys, again, before Hulk Hogan, before the industry changed, a lot of these guys, and in some cases it still happens, if you don't work, you don't get paid. There was a very famous promo by Steve Austin when he broke his neck, and he was cutting a promo with Sergeant Slaughter. And he said, oh, you saying I can't be on TV because I broke my little neck? Like I'm supposed to be concerned, like I'm supposed to think you're concerned about my welfare. And Slaughter had said, yeah, I am concerned. He said, son, you ain't been in my house. The way they're paying me while I'm out hurt, I'm going to be on welfare for too long. And it was kind of a jab at how wrestling is and why guys continue to work when hurt, because if you don't work when hurt, you're not getting paid. So you want to take as little time off as possible. But, you know, so I know that the Baloney Blowout was recently renamed the Bockwinkel Blowout because Nick Bockwinkel isn't in the greatest of health right now. And, you know, it might be his last Cauliflower Alley Club. And you know, I wish I had ran into him, but it's such a big place now. It's so busy doing deals. I think I might have mentioned we're doing the Afterglow, which I'm going to mention in just a minute. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the Cauliflower Alley Club. But, you know, it's the Glow Girls are there, and all sorts of great old wrestlers. You know, I ran into the Destroyer, J.J. Dillon, Kevin Sullivan. You know, even if you're in the finish wrestling business, it's a great place to be. Even if you're a fan, you know, become a member, hang out. There's lots of great merchandise, and hey, maybe in a few years, you know, I might be able to take enough time to go and take a few weeks and drive to the CAC with a lot of my videos and DVDs and stuff, and to Las Vegas, and you know, go and have some stuff in their gimmick area for sale. It's a very, very cool thing, lots of cool stuff, so it's definitely not something to be missed. You know, I've been a member of the Cauliflower Alley Club, oh gosh, several years, and I kept getting emails, are you going to come down to Vegas, and I finally said, you know what, I got the money and I got the time, and it was always something in the years prior, either I had the money and didn't have the time, or I, you know, had the time but didn't have the money, and this was the perfect storm of having the money and having the time. Went down there, had the absolute time of my life, you know, seeing all these guys in person, talking to them, and just everything. It's just a fantastic time. You know, for 3 days, I was on cloud 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. It was just such a fantastic experience. I put in for a raffle for the Cauliflower Alley Club commemorative belt. I put in something like $30 or $40. So it's just a fantastic experience. would recommend it to anyone. Get down to Vegas. I don't care who the hell you are in wrestling. Get down to Vegas. Be a part of the Cauliflower Alley Club. It is in your best interest to do stuff. Okay? Speaking of the Cauliflower Alley Club, we have some really insanely cool merchandise from the Cauliflower Alley Club. We've got Cauliflower Alley Club shoes. That's right, you heard me. Cauliflower Alley Club shoes. We've got some Converse Chuck Martin shoes, Converse Chuck Martin high-top shoes with the Cauliflower Alley Club. With this past year, which was the 50th anniversary of the CAC reunion, and this is absolutely some of the coolest stuff. I got a pair for myself because these are absolutely some of the coolest things that I have ever seen. You know, the sides of each shoe had some of the legends in wrestling. You've got the Cauliflower Alley Club logo, 50th anniversary. You've got Harley Race on one side. You've got Butcher Vachon, Bobby Heenan, Lou Thez, Brian Blair, Bockwinkel. So many great personalized wrestling, all on these Converse Chuck Taylor high-top shoes. It's terrific. And on the tongue of the shoe, even cooler, you've got a Madison Square Garden marquee, and on the one shoe you've got the Madison Square Garden marquee. It says Wrestling Tonight, San Martino versus Rocca, and you've got the name Sweet Daddy Siki, Dick the Destroyer Buyer, Terry Funk, J.J. Dillon, Danny Hodge. You know, the other tongue has got names. It's got Bruiser versus the Sheik, the Olympia. It's got Billy Two Rivers, Larry Hennig, Scrap Iron, Adam Pearce, Don Leo Jonathan, gorgeous Michelle Starr. So, I mean, this is a very seriously cool piece of merchandise and very limited. And the coolest thing about it is that a portion of the price of these things goes right back to the Cauliflower Alley Club Benevolent Fund. So what you can do is when you buy them, or if you want to do a special order of these things, a portion of the money goes right back to Benevolent Fund. So for these guys that are down on their luck, these guys that, you know, don't have the health insurance and they can't afford it and they're got all sorts of problems, the Benevolent Fund helps these guys. So you're supporting wrestling in more than one way by buying these shoes. Even if you like I did, hell, I have no intention of putting these things on as shoes. These things are staying, they're going to be in a shrine, you know, they're going to be there, but they're outstanding. They're outstanding. And you know what? Honestly, they're pretty cool just to wear. If you got some wrestling fans and your friends, go wear them around, pick them. Oh, man, what are those cool shoes you're wearing, man? Those Chucks, oh, man, they're pretty cool. So pretty cool there. We've got something else we picked up at the Cauliflower Alley Club. We picked up the Glow documentary. There was a documentary done on the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. If you were a fan of the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling back in the 80s, there was a documentary done a few years back. I'm trying to look at I got this disc in front of me here. About 2 years ago, they had this documentary. And this is a very cool DVD. It kind of goes a little bit into detail about where some of the Glow Girls now. They put a lot of time and a lot of money in trying to find some of these girls that probably haven't been seen since the end of the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. So it's very, very cool. This is, and we're, this DVD, this particular DVD, one of a kind. I've only got one of these things. I may be able to get more, and I'm going to talk about that in just 1 second. I may be able to get more, but I am not sure. I don't want to promise anything. But this DVD is signed by Little Egypt, Lightning, Roxy Astor, Tulsa, Hollywood, and MTV Melody Trouble Vixen. So go ahead, start pouring over YouTube for all these Glow Girls matches. These ladies are fantastic. I spent more time, I think, talking with the Glow Girls than they did with any other wrestling personality when I was at the Cauliflower Alley Club. They are absolutely fantastic ladies, and the stories they have are so different than any other wrestling story, and it's just really fantastic. I mentioned Afterglow before. Afterglow is the project of Roxy Astor of Glow. Roxy had such a wonderful time meeting up with all of her friends at the Cauliflower Alley Club. She at the Glow documentary, that she wanted to do her own thing where she brings all the Glow girls she possibly can find herself back. You know, she's exchanging her personal information. And if you hear this podcast and you're a Glow girl and you want to be a part of Afterglow, feel free. Email me. Email me direct at gdennis@sfpincchicago.com. You can email the podcast at sfpincchicago.com. Call me direct, 847-489-2087. I will make sure that if you are a Glow girl, you will get with Roxy. Roxy wants to take this thing all over the U.S. She wants to have a thing where completely unscripted, where all the Glow girls can just go out there and share their stories unscripted. You know, this is a project really, truly for the fans, where the fans can come out to these arenas and talk to the Glow girls, ask them any question they want to ask, get autographs, just hang out and be with the Glow girls. It's a really fun experience. I'm a big fan of this, you know, and the Afterglow. And these live sessions are all going to be filmed. They're all going to be taped, produced on DVD. I have the first DVD. You can get it directly from us. You want to ask about it, you know, make sure you email me, email the podcast, email me direct, whatever one you want to do. Make sure you put Afterglow DVD in your subject line, and I'll make sure to get back with you. And what's the coolest thing about the Afterglow DVD? Okay, here's the coolest part of it all. Each and every one of these DVDs is signed individually by Roxy Astor. So when you place an order with me, I go and call Roxy and I say, hey Roxy, this person wants to sign to whatever. So if you say, hey, I wanted Roxy Loves Joe Blow, she'll sign it. Anything you want. It comes straight back to SFP headquarters, and we get it right to you. So anything you want, individually autographed. And this isn't anything where it's those, you know, they autographed a dozen of these things that are showing you get it. No, this isn't anything where it's a stamped signature. No, none of that stuff. You're going to get an original signature from Roxy each and every time you buy one of these DVDs. And again, your purchase of the DVD supports the Afterglow fan party. So the more money that we get, the more money we can give to Roxy, and the more money she can put towards the Afterglow and make sure that this show comes to Chicago. I myself am pushing for it. I told Roxy, look, I will spend my own time and my own money looking for a place for you to do something here. You know, I don't get a dime off of it. I just want you to come here with the Glow Girls because I think this is a really cool thing. So, you know, I'm a huge fan of this thing, and I'm a big fan of Glow. You know, there was a time, I admit, you know, I mean, in 1986 when Glow first appeared, this was the first women's wrestling I'd ever seen. So I was like, wow, there's women wrestlers, wow. And I got to a phase when I was a little older, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to poop all over Glow, you know, they're not real wrestlers, this and that. But, you know, as I got older, I got a better appreciation for Glow, and these women were wrestlers. You know, they worked hard. They're trained by Mondo Guerrero. They worked very, very hard. I don't think they often get enough respect for what they've done, but I respect them a whole bunch. You know, I think that what they do is great. I'm a big fan of the Glow fan party. I've talked to a lot of the Glow girls. I got a lot of contact information from them. The Afterglow DVD, I think, is fantastic. We've got another deal that may be coming up. I don't want to release too many details too soon, but if I do, when it happens, and it's everything but the T's being dotted and the I's being crossed. But if it happens, it's going to be very, very cool. So keep an eye out for that. Hitman Hart. You know, we talked a little bit earlier about Hitman Hart and Survivor Series, and if you haven't seen the Hitman Hart, and WWE certainly tried their best to block it because it really wasn't something they liked over the years, you can get it from us. There is a 2-disc DVD set. The first part is the Hitman Hart film, the original Hitman Hart film. It has some new commentary on it from the producers. So the producer of the Real News Network. These guys, again, the Real News Network, they're a great bunch of people, really easy to work with, just super fun. And the documentary is very, very cool. The second disc is Life and Death of Owen Hart. Talks in depth as much as they could about Owen, about what happened to Owen, and kind of the parallels between, what happened to Bret and the parallels as it relates to pro wrestling. In any case, it's very, very, very cool. We have several factory sealed copies, so make sure you pick it up. If memory serves, the cost is $35. That includes shipping. I believe that's worldwide shipping, but at bare minimum, $35 will get you the disc, the 2-disc set, mind you, factory sealed in the U.S. But I think that $35 is worldwide. But I do have to check in on that. I don't always have everything in front of me that I'd like to. Then the final thing we're going to talk about here before we wrap is going to be the Pillman Show, the Brian Pillman Show. And if you tuned into wrestling any less than 10 years ago, you might not know the name Brian Pillman. But Brian, he was an ex-football player. He had played for the Cincinnati Bengals. He had played in the Canadian Football League, and he got into pro wrestling. And at about 6'1", 220-ish, he was kind of considered small for pro wrestling. But he was one of the pioneers in World Championship Wrestling of that high-flying style. He had some great match with Jushin Liger when Jushin Liger was competing stateside. He had some great match with Brad Armstrong. Just a real wonder in the ring. And he had successfully managed, when he knew that WCW, World Championship Wrestling, had the intent to not renew his very large and very guaranteed contract, he went and successfully managed to negotiate a storyline where he said, what you guys need to do is I'm going to pretend to be this loose cannon, and no one will know about it except me, but I'll just act like I'm really crazy and off the wall and everything. I'm going to act like I'm nuts. And what I think you guys should do is I think you guys should fire me. But to make it real, when you guys fire me, I think you should do it like for real. And I'll just kind of work without a contract for a while, but I think that'll be really, that'll add some, legitimacy to it. You send a memo firing me, and that'll make sure that it seems real and everything. And I'll go and work in Extreme Championship Wrestling and ECW because they're not a competitor, and I'll work with them, and I'll play like I'm crazy and I was fired and everything. And what Brian ended up doing is he ended up convincing them to give him a full and complete release from his contract, which enabled him to go and sign up with the World Wrestling Federation. And unfortunately, Brian had suffered a car wreck, and it hurt his ankle, and he needed to have surgery on his ankle. And unfortunately for Brian, it was right about the time that WWE was looking to hire him, and they didn't have guaranteed contracts at the time, so he was really worried about his job with WWE. You know, he had just gotten signed by them, and here he is with a broken ankle. He can't wrestle. So he went and walked on his ankle and walked around on crutches as much as he could, and it really hurt his ankle worse to the point where it needed to be rebroken and fused together. And, you know, Brian was in a lot of pain, and he ended up dying in early 90, well, not early, I guess, late 97, before the original Bad Blood pay-per-view, where he had passed away in his hotel room of a heart attack. And, you know, there was probably some drug abuse involved as well, but it was a heart attack was the official cause of it. And the Cincinnati wrestling company, Heartland Wrestling Association, had put on the Brian Pillman Memorial Show, and we bought out the remaining stock of their VHS when the company lost the rights to broadcast it. So the Brian Pillman Memorial Show is 5 tapes, it's 5 VHS, and it's got a lot of up-and-coming WCW guys who would be in WCW and guys who would be in the WWF a little later on. It's got a lot of independent stars, and what's really notable about it is the first time when you're going to see WCW World Championship Wrestling guys on the same show as a WWE guy. Now, they didn't wrestle each other, but they were there, and that was really, really important at that time. Just to have them there was enough. So very, very important, very big thing as far as pro wrestling. And we had the 5 tapes. The 5 tapes, $60. I know a lot of people don't have VHS anymore, but I think that if you don't have VHS and you're a wrestling fan, you're missing out, because not everything is DVD. But that said, we've been talking for about an hour and a half. It's almost our longest thing. Like I said, we've got a lot of stuff to cover, a lot of ground to cover, but I will make sure that in the future we do these things at least bare minimum of monthly. I'll try to do it sooner. It just really depends on what's happening in wrestling at that time. But I promise you that we will not go as long as it's been, you know, between broadcasts. So anyhow, it's time for plugs. So we've talked about Daniel Puder and My Life, My Power. That's mylifemypower.org. We've talked about Afterglow, the Afterglow Fan Party. And you can see the Afterglow Fan Party if you go to Facebook. Look up Afterglow Fan Party. Look up Roxy Astor. She's on Twitter. She's on Facebook. Check out our press release. It's got all that information right there. You go to sfpinchicago.com. You look up press releases. It's there. All that stuff is there. You know, it's, let's see, who else we got to go and talk about right now? Oh, let's see. There's our YouTube channel. You're going to find all of our archive podcasts there. youtube.com/sfpinchicago. Twitter.com/sfpinchicago. Facebook.com/sfpinchicago. If you want to find us on LinkedIn. Now, all those things, if you go to sfpinchicago.com, if you go there, you're going to find all these links. All these links will be there. You see affiliates and links. You're going to see everything that's associated with us, everything that's got a website. I don't think I put in the Afterglow Fan Party yet. It will be put in. That's my bad if it hasn't. But it should be. The Afterglow Fan Party Facebook should definitely be put in. They're definitely something that we're partnered up with. If you got questions or suggestions about this podcast, email it to podcast@sfpinchicago. Something else to remember about this podcast is that, any suggestions, questions, anything you got, we'll address them, and we may be having guest stars on our podcast before too long. We might invite Roxy Astor on our podcast, or if we got information on either their glow girls, we might invite them on our podcast. So, keep in touch. We got some really cool stuff. It's not always, it's a lot different from any other podcast out there. So, look at our archives, look at all of our email addresses, look at all of our websites, check all of it out. There's a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool discussions. And until next time, we'll see you front row ringside.